I appreciate you for what you are, but I just don't like you. Hello and welcome back to my channel, or hi if you're new. My name is Emma, complete grad, film student, and once upon a time I said I was going to stop making videos on my bedroom floor. But here we are. The energy to go out, living room, do my setup, get all of my lights, all of that, it's just, she's lacking. She's severely lacking. I read a bunch of things and I want to talk about them. But like, that's nothing new. I read some good stuff though, so I'm very excited to share that with you. I read quite a range of things. I read things from some classics to some more like philosophy kind of stuff, some more practical stuff, just some more like sciencey non-fiction stuff. Pretty much a dead split of 50-50 fiction non-fiction. Like I've said about a million times, once I finished my my degree in my undergrad, I felt like I had so much more freedom in what I could read, what I wanted to read. So I feel like I've kind of gone for it. But then also trying not to like lose sight of the things that like I love, like the things I love. I read another one of Calvino's books. The one everybody starts with is If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller, which I highly recommend. That is a wonderful book. If you're a bibliophile, you will love that. Oh my god, will you love that. But this is absolutely just as worthy. Calvino, The Baron in the Trees. From the age of 12, the Baron Cosimo Piovasco di Ronda makes his home among ash, elm, magnolia, plum and almond living up in the trees. He walks through paths made of twisted branches of olives, makes his bed in a holly oak, bathes in a fountain constructed from popular bark. An aerial library holds the books with which he educates himself in philosophy and mathematics. Suspended among the trees, the Baron adventures with bandits and pirates, conducts a passionate love affair, and watches the age of enlightenment pass by beneath him. If you are into dark academia, you will love this. This for me really felt like the kind of thing that you fantasize about when you are reading things like If We Were Villains or The Secret History. This is, my camera's propped up on If We Were Villains actually. We know Calvino loves books. So this is kind of like that fairy tale for people who love books. I don't know about you guys, but I have, one of the recurring dreams that I have, I've had this so many times, like those dreams where I'm exploring, like those exploration dreams, they're like the fucking best, right? And some of my reoccurring ones are often in 18th century, like these big 18th century palaces, houses. I'm sure you're all like keeling over with shock, right? That's one of my reoccurring dreams. But like whenever that you have it where you get to explore like a library or something like that, that's that feeling of just like curiosity and excitement and like passion for like reading. Inkheart as well, that really like kind of reminds me of this. The like love of like learning and knowledge and exploration, that's kind of like in that like childish, like whimsical kind of way, because I feel like that's just one of these things that as a kid you kind of think about doing, right? I'm gonna like climb up a tree, live here, and I'm never gonna come back down. I have definitely done that before as a kid. Like in your head, we're like, oh, you know, this will be my living room, I will sleep here, this will be my kitchen. Like mapping that out in the trees and stuff, like, and figuring out, because we had a really cool garden growing up, like there were a lot of trees you could climb. You can climb from one tree to another, that kind of thing, and you were there. Like we had also like almost there was a lot of like shrubbery in our garden, so we found like little tunnels almost like through the shrubbery and like cutting our way through them. Like that was a fucking sick part of my childhood, and I have a lot of love for it, and that's what this like feels like a lot. It's those things you have as a kid that you kind of forget about, that like Calvino drums up again and like goes for. And like I was speaking to one of my Italian friends, and they're made to read this at school as kids. So for a lot of people this is kids literature. I feel like you need to give Calvino a little bit more like credit than kids literature. Don't feel like, oh, it's a kid's book, I'm not gonna read it. Fucking read it, it's fucking fantastic. And one thing that like, again, Calvino is a bibliophile. At the end of this, there is a Russian prince that he runs into. The Russian prince that everybody is in love with. Obviously it's Prince Andrei, because I was with my mum, so I read that and I was like, nah, what the fuck? It's brilliant. Like, it's an Easter egg, but like it kind of is, right? It's very playful, it's very adventurous, and there is just something about fantasizing about building a library up in trees and all of that kind of like practical creative stuff where you're like, okay, I have an idea, how am I gonna make it work? Like that's what this feels like, and it's really, really good. And I really recommend it. This should be adapted because it's so fun and playful, and I have a lot of love and a lot of time for Calvino. If you want to capture a bit about like cheeky, imaginative childhood nostalgia, go for this. I mean, it kind of feels like Calvino is one of those people that never lost that imagination they had as a kid. That's how this reads. Really recommend it. And next, I read, this is a milestone for me. I read what for me is a very important book. I read Carol. I think now that the adaptation of Carol with Kate Blanchett and Manne Rooney, excellent. That is a very good adaptation. It is very, very true to the book. The only thing for me is that this book doesn't hit the things that I like. I can appreciate it culturally for what it is. I can appreciate it as a very well-written book, but this story isn't for me. And it pains my woman-loving woman ass to say that. It really, really does. And I realise I don't like it for the same reasons that I don't like the film. For those of you who don't know, this is set in New York in the 1940s? 50s. Published in 1952, and is the story of a young woman who falls in love with an older woman, Therese and Carol. Therese. One of the things I complained about with the film was that I feel like the pacing of their love story was weird. In this, it kind of like gives it more time, and then you understand how much time they have spent together. But the thing that I think I don't like is feel like there's a lack of world building in this. These two world build because it takes nothing for granted, and I think because this is more contemporary, that I feel like it doesn't pay as much attention or feel like it needs to pad out the world a bit more. But for me, like, that's what I need when I read. If I read fiction, I want to read this like world. Like I want to be able to see the story. Maybe that was kind of part of it, that it's meant to be like a little bit more sparse and then really all they have is their love and each other. But yeah, I think I was just underwhelmed by this again, and it sucks because now I'm like, it's not the film, it's not the book, it's just the story, which sucks to say because this is such an important cultural thing, and I'm like, I appreciate you for what you are, but I just don't like you. And that's why it took me a little bit longer to read it, because I was just kind of like I couldn't bring myself to not finish it. That would be doing it no justice whatsoever. This just didn't tick my boxes, and I think it's love with like more subtle, the drama is more subtle. There aren't any like the big face-offs or like that kind of stuff. It's more like that kind of more, not to give spoilers, but more kind of like being followed, and more like waiting for happen. The more like the drama almost feels like it happens off page in a lot of ways. Like dramatic stuff happens, but like it's not a dramatic novel. Which in a way is good, but I do think, and will stand by, one of the most important things about this story, both the book and the film, is the fact that the ending isn't fucking tragic. That is so important with any kind of lesbian literature, sapphic literature, gay literature. It is so important, and I cannot emphasize that enough. As somebody who has spent a term writing, directing, making her own little woman-loving woman script. Hopefully by the time you see this there might be a link for you in the description if I can find one. Please go have a look at it. I have very much poured a lot of my heart and soul into it, and I'm very, very proud of it. There is a canonical thing of woman-loving woman, gay love stories ending tragically. Because you're being punished. You're being punished for your love. You're being punished for your affair. That is what is happening. You're being told that despite everything, what you're doing is inherently wrong, and you do deserve very much, it's pretty much always they die. There is always a tragic ending. You cannot be together, whether it is because of society or because pretty much it's a deus ex machina, right? God is intervening and saying this is wrong. That is what that is, whether these are lovers who are taken apart from each other, all of that kind of stuff. Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I love that film, but it still does that. I'm not necessarily saying that that's like a guilt thing, whatever, but it is so often tragically ended. And I went out of my way to make sure that my it's just a term exercise at school, it's just a student film, but like I made sure that's not how mine ended. Mine has to end with, it is a happy ending, but it's more like a hopeful ending. Like, you know that's not where the story ends, but it's in a lot of ways where the story starts. But that's why, and that is why this is so important. It is not a tragic ending. In a lot of ways it's not a conclusive ending, but then I guess just depending on you and how you feel about the story and all of that, you can see where you think this would go next. I guess almost in a way the ending that we kind of needed desperately, needed and wanted from Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Evelyn and Cecilia got done so dirty. This is knocking about the same time period. I think the way things happened were important, but again, it's always going to be tragic. And as a reader who gets emotionally invested in these characters and these relationships, you're always gonna have to want that they deserve better. And I don't feel like I read Carol feeling like, oh, they deserve better. I'm like, oh, you kind of wonder where it would go. And maybe, I was gonna say, if you're homophobe, maybe they will burn in hell. But I think this is a very important milestone in lesbianism, in gay culture, in representation, in not having tragic endings for queer love stories. And I cannot stress this enough. Do you know the toll that it takes on a young queer person when every single bit of media that you consume about like relationships and love, when it is about you, ends badly? You're basically being conditioned to believe that you don't deserve a happy ending. And that's bullshit. Happy endings aren't just for straight people. I think this is a very important book for what it is. A very important story. It's just a shame that it didn't float my boat. It just isn't my thing. Am I sad about it? Yeah, it is what it is. I have a lot of appreciation for it. Anyway, let's move on to the non-fiction that I've read recently. So like I said, I actually directed this term. It was interesting. It was more than interesting, it was fucking fantastic. The movies come out really well, I'm very happy with it. It's a student short film, it's a fucking term exercise, like, it is in itself what it is. Is it a cinematic masterpiece? No, absolutely not. School has a big philosophy of like, fail fast and fail hard. You learn so quickly when you do that. And I definitely learned a lot this term, let's put it that way. But one thing I think a lot of people get wrong about directing, at least as students, is that we see it as like this godly, almost, creative role. Which in a way it is. You create character, you create world, you create a story. But also, you lead a team. This is something that I have seen people get consistently wrong about being a director, about being a producer. On a film production, they're mum and dad. You're a leader. That is literally what part of your job is. Lead your team. At this point, I've basically just witnessed people, when they become directors, kind of go almost one of two ways. You watch people go over this side and they become people pleasers. They want to say yes to everybody, they don't want to rub anyone the wrong way, they don't want to say no to anyone, they don't want to upset anyone. But when you're over here doing this, you don't give your project any direction. You give everybody their own direction, but then everybody kind of just that. And then your story, like, it kind of falls apart in that way. Then I've seen people go over this way. And I've seen people become literal tyrants. People have become so difficult to work with that everyone's like, it doesn't matter how good as a director you are, in terms of directing your actors specifically, it doesn't matter how, like, good your story is or your project, whatever, people don't want to work with you. Coppola once said this thing where, like, film director is the last truly dictatorial role you can have. For people who take that to heart. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did when I started this term was like, I want to do this properly. Like, and I think I'd like to say that I have. You would have to watch the movie and ask my unit. I'm never going to be able to give you an objective thing, but like, oh yeah, they all had a great time. Like, that's just ultimately not for me to say, I guess. But one of the things I wanted to make sure was just do a little bit of reading. I am of the opinion that you can learn everything. You can learn anything and everything being a director, leading a team. It's a skill like anything else. improves with experience, and there are always going to be theories about like how you can do this best, blah blah blah, what's like the most efficient way of doing this, what is the most like emotionally intelligent way of doing this, what is just the best way of doing this. I personally believe that there is no one way of doing this. There isn't a right way, but there sure as hell is a wrong way. There is definitely a wrong way, but I don't think there's a right way. I read this because I was like, I want to see like what the other like options are. I have a deep-rooted fear of what my blind spots as a person are. I'm terrified of them. If I was going to probably bring up my therapist, not you guys, but like this was basically me going like, okay, am I going to make any stupid mistakes when you're dealing with people? Because that's another thing I think people forget, is you're dealing with people. You're not dealing with robots or minions. You're dealing with grown up, complex, emotionally intelligent, creative people. So I really, really rate this. Is this complicated to understand? No, it's not. For God's sakes, it's written for fucking finance bros. The bar is low. The bar is in hell, but the bar is low. In full faith that every single one of you will be able to understand this, get something out of this. It's actually a collection of articles that talk about leadership in different capacity, etc, etc. The main sort of thing that they talk about a lot is concepts of empathy, self-awareness, self-regulation. These kind of things seem to be like a really important triad for being an emotionally intelligent leader. And the thing was, as I was reading this, I was like, you know, this is a lot of the stuff that I do. It's a lot about like thinking about the group, less of an emphasis on individualism and individuality, which is like, you probably think as a leader, we feel like, oh, if you're a leader, that you get to be the individual, but you don't. The whole point is that you're not. The whole point is that you are somebody who, you are the team. You have to lead these people and keep these people all together in what you're doing. So almost like you're the one person who doesn't get to be the individual. I was just reading this thinking, so much of this is just so obvious. And then it occurred to me, this is written for men. It's written for men. So many of these traits that like this book is going on about being like, oh, this is so important for a leader. I'm like, women do this. Women have been conditioned to do this since like before we came out of the womb. If you are a woman, you will literally roll your eyes at so many of the things in here. I'm like, wow, you're supposed to be compassionate? No way! I didn't know that. Wow! It isn't just about me. Oh my god, revolutionary! But yeah, so many of these articles are written by men, not all of them, thank fuck. But you can, it's so apparent once you clock that this is written for men, but it's not written for women, you're like, wow. No wonder men need to be told that you're supposed to be self-aware. The fact that you have to be told that you need to be empathetic to be a leader. The fact that you need to be told that you have to be able to self-regulate to be a leader. It's wild. It is fucking wild. Like, the patriarchy is doing us so dirty, and we need to just continuously be aware of that, because all of the traits that this has said over and over again that makes you a good leader are ones that all of the women I know have. Not all of the men, but all of the women I know do. The things that they lack are the confidence and belief to think that they belong in these positions of power and leadership. It's fucking wild. One thing a lot of men that I know have is ego. That is why they're in those positions, because they think they deserve it. And I've seen that go then horribly wrong, as I've said. These people thinking that they're like, oh, that like basically it's their fucking birthright to be in these positions of power, and the reality is like, no, you fucked it up. You fucked it up big time because you thought about yourself and not the wider health of your team and the project and the fucking creative thing that you're doing, your fucking film. And your film has suffered as a result because you're a dickhead. Like, if you're a woman, most of what you read in this is obvious. The one thing I think that you then need is the confidence to know that you deserve to be leading a team. You can handle that responsibility. You can handle those emotions. You can fucking deal with it. And again, I've said this before, I will continue to bang on about this for as long as I fucking can. One of my favourite things that men have done is rebrand anger as not an emotion. Once you clock that, you're like, yeah, we want to talk about emotional I have seen men be so much more emotional than women in professional fucking settings. But like, sure, anger's not emotion, it's fine. It's fine. My tears are more emotional than your anger. That's okay. Okay. Okay, if you say so. It's overexposed, you can't see this. But yeah, I had a fucking field day reading this, and I really, really recommend it. Absolutely to women, because... But then, yeah, also to men, because, like, please work on your emotional intelligence, your self-awareness, your self-regulation, your empathy. I don't think you can miss with this. I think it's important that people understand leadership for what it should be, and it also makes sense for, like, some people are really good managers, but being a good manager doesn't make you a good leader. But I do think that all leaders need to be good managers. You're dealing with people. And again, if we take, my book is on this, my camera's on this book. If we take this, if we think about this, I am so a believer that there is no such thing as there's no such thing as a rational decision. That is one of the things that I feel like I've clocked in the last like 2 years. There's no such thing as a rational decision. So don't try and be like this wholly robotic, unemotional person when you're making like decisions and important decisions, because you can't. And once you realise that, you go a lot further. There's no such thing as an unemotional decision. We always include our emotions in the way that we choose things and decide things. And I think then when you lead, that is such an important thing to just bear in mind. If you're dealing with people day in, day out, they're so important to know. I think that's what filmmaking is. I can't sit and make this on my own. I can't sit and make films on my own. You are constantly working with teams, constantly working with other people, constantly working with big teams as well. And as well, if you're directing like with an actor, you're trying to get into your emotions, but you're understanding that, and you just need any kind of emotional capacity to do that makes you good at what you do. For me, a lot of this stuff was obvious, but then once you see it more put in a critical capacity, you just start to acknowledge it more, and you just kind of like, okay, don't take these things for granted. Realize that you can take these concepts, but you can push them, run with them, and really like be more. It was for me, for more than anything, to just be more conscious of my behaviour in a position of power, especially leading a team, and then how that would influence the people that I'm working with. And my objective more than anything was obviously to make them feel comfortable, that their opinions are valued, because they were, to make people know that, like, especially with a creative thing, because like the one thing you can't do is make people care. You can't make people care, especially in like a school setting where people haven't necessarily, some people in my team, when they got there, they didn't necessarily want to be there. And I think once you let go of that, I don't know, at least for me, I grew up a lot once I let go of that. One of the things that I, tried my best to do, and this is heavily reflected in this, is that when you're working on a creative thing with other creative people, that you just respect people's opinions. The amount of times that my unit, I don't want to say roasted or skewered, but the amount of times that they gave really constructive feedback and criticism on my script, like, it's invaluable. Because here's the thing, while initially I was like grumbling about it, they were fucking right. They were right every single time. And I think that's so important to just also not be that precious, because if you're somebody that doesn't take constructive criticism, if you're in a creative industry, it's one of these things you need to learn how to do. And as well, when you respect people's decisions like that, they're just happier to then give you more. You can't make people care, but you can respect people's opinions and value their input, value the people that you're working with as the creative individuals that they are. And just because you're leading the team doesn't mean that you're better than everyone else. It doesn't mean that you're the most important person. Like I said, I've seen people adopt this mentality. For these people that will not accept criticism on a draft, and their word is final. It's like, why are you in this industry then that is so deeply collaborative? Go write a fucking book and have your final fucking say on things. This is then not the industry for you. I don't think there's anybody who wouldn't benefit from reading this. And I think it does, I'd like to say, shatter a couple myths of what people think powerful leadership is. Because it is not being a dick and chewing people out in a boardroom because you have more power than everyone else. It is not an abuse of power, which often portrayals of power are, especially when that is power done by men. And that is, in my opinion, not how you lead at all. In my opinion, if you're yelling at people, it's indicative that you don't have any power, that the only way that you know how to control is through intimidation and humiliating people, all of that kind of stuff. You're putting people down to raise you above. It means that you're not secure in your leadership, you're not secure in your position of power. That's not how you lead. At least not to me. I really think everyone can benefit from reading this, my viewers especially, and maybe it'll make you realise that you're more suited to leadership than you actually think you were. You're probably more deserving of a lot of people in positions of power, and you do more with it anyway. So those are my final thoughts on that. Next, I read Kate Mann's Entitled. I think this is a very interesting sort of take on very contemporary feminism. This is published in 2020. This mainly talks about things going like 2014 to now, as a lot of the examples that she uses throughout her book. And I think that's very important because her book actually doesn't include a lot of theory like a lot of the other like, you guys know I like reading a good bit of theory. I was gonna go like who doesn't, but she doesn't necessarily use lots of theory to back it up, but she uses very easily understandable, easily digestible examples, and also ones that like you probably have heard of. If you have Twitter or an internet connection, you will be familiar with a lot of the examples that she gives. I'm someone who has Twitter. I was. Kate Manne is an American feminist academic philosopher, and this was published in 2020. So it's a very, very, very contemporary take. This isn't difficult. This took me a long time to read because I'm dyslexic, but lots of you will probably blow through this in like a day or two. Super, super recommend. It gives a framework for a lot of the arguments, especially feminist arguments, that so many of us engage in every single fucking day. Every single fucking day. I will be honest with you, this was infuriating to read. It's infuriating to read. It is often nauseating to read. And I think it is a very, very important in capturing of a moment in modern feminism. In, if you want to call it a third wave feminism, whatever, but 21st century feminism, this is an important milestone, especially for the turning of a decade. Her chapters are on, this is all about entitlement, about men's entitlement to, you know, anything that is to do with women. Entitlement of and to privileged men, admiration, sex, consent, medical care, bodily control, domestic labour, knowledge, power, and girls. This is a wild ride. There are bits that are fucking rough, because when she's talking about admiration, she's using extreme examples often, but to be fair, you know, as you should, use an extreme example and then you can use all of the examples under that. This proves your point, and then this shows you how in a wider setting it's prevalent even in like tiny interactions. I think that's something a lot of us learned last year with a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff. I didn't know what a microaggression was at the time. I do now. And just because it's small doesn't mean it's not like, yeah, racist, sexist, or just offensive. And these like things, they add up and they pile up. And when you're doing, you know, emotional labour and all that kind of work that you should not be doing, that takes its toll. So, gentlemen, instead of getting your girlfriend, friends, mum, colleagues, whatever, to explain stuff about feminism to you and the toll it takes on them, please read this. Okay, here is my, I'll explain more about the book in a second, but my sort of feeling in general, this should have been a no nuance November thing, but my opinion as it sounds right now is that feminism in the 21st century will not progress anymore. There is no more work we can do until men start doing the work themselves. There is there's nothing else that you can tell them, that you can teach them. They have to learn to start doing it themselves. Look, we can bang on about the whole, not all men, whatever thing, as long as we bloody well like, but this is just about how you treat women in general. Just how you treat women. If men do not start doing the work, nothing will change. Women can't change any more than we already bloody have. When you're the one who's been there doing so much emotional labour to get rid of that internalized misogyny, to work, to support the women around you, all of that kind of stuff. If we are doing that, we are making our lives better within ourselves, with each other, raising other women up, doing the emotional labour with each other, making sure that, like, as a white woman, that you don't just, like, live in your little white woman bubble, but you are an intersectional feminist. Like, you understand that while you're a woman, you're still a white woman, and you have all of these privileges that these other women don't. Like, this is the work that we have been doing, or, like, that I have been doing. Men need to do the work too. If they don't do the work, we have a disparity problem. We already do, but men need to learn to catch up. And I'm seeing this with women my age when it comes to dating. Because we have done this work, we have all gone to therapy, many of us are degree educated, we have jobs, we have good jobs, we have our friends and our support systems, and understanding sexuality, especially, you know, bisexuality and lesbianism, realising that, like, there are lots of women that I know who are my age who do not need men. They do not need them. We like them. A lot of us still like men. I can tell you sexuality isn't a choice because I still like men. Men can really be great. They can be fucking awful, but they can be great. And these women are realising that, like, it takes a great man to be better than no man. And if men don't start doing the emotional labour, if men don't start doing the fucking work, you're the adult toddler that we do not want to date. We do not want to deal with this. We are not here to be your mother. You have to do the work. And if you get upset by hearing that, you are part of the problem. Assess that. But men need to start doing the emotional labour because these women are too smart to deal with your dumbass.
I actually feel like I have a note on this and might explain it better. As a bisexual woman, considering the fact that I date both men and I date women, there are a lot of things that I feel like I have on, like, a checklist for men that I very actively, like, look for when I'm on dates, when I engage with them, etc, that I don't with women. For example, I will be very keen to spot, is he, you know, has he gone to therapy? Is he emotionally intelligent? Is he self-aware? Is his fucking flat tidy? Like, it sounds dumb, but it's then, you know, understanding, like, emotional intelligence, domestic labour, all of that kind of stuff. I don't have these same standards with women because I can assume that this is default. I can assume that this comes standard. Kind of like a dating package. You can assume that it's, you know, included, like it's nothing special. Like, I'm not going to be like, wow, she's emotionally intelligent. But sometimes you're like, wow, he's self-aware. But it is in part of the fact that we do accept the bare minimum from men. We accept the bare minimum from men. We really do. The bar is in hell. Any woman that dates men, the bar is in hell. When you date women, that's just not the case because you can, like, expect more from them. So what I'm saying is that men do just need to do more work. Go to therapy, engage in feminist discourses, just do better. It's good for you. It'll be good for your partnerships. It doesn't hurt anybody. It can only be positive.
No. I have even more thoughts. Look, if you're a man, you genuinely only need to work on the following few things. Look, go to therapy, engage in feminist discourses, work on your insecurities, and learn to eat pussy. These are the only things you need to do. Like, I don't know why this is so hard, but that's genuinely all you need to do. If you could just start there, that would be fab. Thank you.
For me, the fact that men don't do a lot of these things that women do is, like, baffling. The fact that a lot of men don't have the same, like, drive and devotion to their own personal growth and self-development is really troubling, like, deeply troubling. Like, you are worth that. You deserve to invest in yourself because also when you do that, you also then invest back into other people and people around you. Like, that's healthy. Then men are also conditioned to think about themselves deeply as individuals, so maybe that's not why. But then also, why does that make sense? Like, if you're conditioned so deeply to believe that you're so important because you're number one, why wouldn't you want to grow yourself and stuff like that? My point is that when you're dating women, like, I feel like it's a lot easier to find this kind of stuff, and I feel like I don't have the same worry going to dating a woman than I do dating a man, like, especially long term. Like, I don't have to worry about her thinking her career is more important than mine, when maybe with a man I do. I don't have to worry, like, are they going to make me, you know, are they going to make me want to stay home with the kids, as I would worry with a man. Any kind of power dynamics, any kind of power struggles, it's just not the same when you date women, whereas, like, that's like an extra additional thing you have to worry about when you date men as a woman. It's like, are you just going to respect me as much as you respect men in your life? Like, come on. But it even goes into, like, emotional maturity and stuff. Like, when I date guys that are older than me. I do not date men my own age, but I do date women my own age. Do with that what you will. Men just need to work harder, do the work. When I say do the work, you can just start with engaging in feminist discourses, reading a book like this, and just going to therapy. Like, that's a great place to start.
One of the things that infuriates me more than anything, is when she's talking about domestic labour. Men don't have to just do the work, do the fucking housework. We are at a point now where we have the same jobs, we work the same hours, we should be earning the same amount of money, but we certainly put the grind in, and our jobs are as important as yours. Our careers are as important as yours. One of the things that really grinds my gear about doing film is like when you tell certain guys that, and they kind of, the attitude they almost have is like, oh, that's cute. One example that Manne uses is that when a heterosexual couple has a new baby, the woman's workload, her domestic labour, increases by, and this isn't just breastfed babies, this is also babies who are formula fed. That's important. A woman's workload will increase by 20 hours. A man's will increase by 10. Of those 10 hours, how many hours is he playing with the baby? 4 or 5. Half. Is that fucked? Yeah. That's fucking fucked. And that's one of the things she talks about. Men have to pick up the slack, and they have to stop being adult toddlers, and they have to please just go to therapy. The amount of like just divorce costs you would save if more men just went to therapy. I go to therapy. Therapy's great. I'm seeing my therapist in half an hour. I love her. Really, really recommend. And I see these arguments about the fact that, yeah, men and women are almost being socialised so differently that they're now inherently incompatible. And I kind of feel like this is one of those things. And being bi, like when I was younger, I really thought like, oh, you know, like I would date women, whatever, but I'd probably never marry one. I'd probably always end up marrying a man. But now I look at men and I see so many of these issues and I'm like, wow, if I married a woman, I wouldn't have any of these problems. And I wouldn't have to worry about that. And that has been one of the like most eye-opening things for me the last like 2 years. It's like, damn. What? So I just think it's important for this to give context to a lot of the things that we're like facing at the moment. And I really do think, especially if you're like a younger guy in like your 20s, like your early 20s, please give this a read. This will honestly do you wonders when it comes to dating and relationships. Her life with you will be so much happier and more fulfilled if you just thought about some of the things that are in here. And I mean that incredibly sincerely. With this, I think there are some chapters which you could take further, and I think there are some examples that aren't in here that I feel like should be. Like she talks about women's right to medical care, especially like black women's like access to medical care, and how like their pain is not taken seriously. Just look at Serena Williams as a fucking example with the birth of her daughter. Women's pain is not taken seriously, but then with every like sort of more minority that you belong to, this discrimination, it compounds. So then if you're black, it's even worse. If you're black and you're disabled, it's even worse. If you're black, disabled, lesbian, it gets even worse. So just, yeah, it's bad. And the interesting point that she made, and I heard this and I was like, I can't now unsee it, is that men's pain is physiologicalized. Men's pain is taken seriously because we assume that men are stoic. Women's pain is pathologized, meaning that you think it's in her head. And then also medical care, like reproductive rights. You see this on TikTok a lot, like stories of women who need men to advocate for their pain, for like the level of pain that they are actually in before it gets taken seriously. Or the fact that maybe they want to have their tubes tied, maybe they have no interest in having children, etc, etc. And that they are not allowed to do this without the permission of their husband. This is single women are not allowed to do this without the permission of a man that is not in their lives, that does not exist to them. It's fucking archaic. And it's also worth noting that Kate Manne is American. This is written from an American perspective, and in my opinion you feel that when you read this, especially when you start reading about abortion laws and all that kind of stuff, because like it's one of these things that also makes me realise like America is fucked. Like, no offence guys, but your country's fucked. I think it's a really important thing to read, and I think it is important to read it now. Really, really recommend. And if you're a young man, read it. You know young men, tell them to read it. And if they turn their noses up at it, and if they're like, oh, I don't want to read this by an angry like feminist, like, interrogate that. Really, really Socratism on it. Why? That was a really interesting one to read, but deeply frustrating and deeply infuriating. Nothing was particularly new, but a lot of it just like padded out ideas, concepts and things that I was already familiar with. Recommend. And finally, with the non-fiction, I read Stuck. This is by Heidi J. Larson. This is about vaccine rumours. And I found this so fascinating. I read this quite quickly. I found this so fascinating. It's not very long, it's like 100 and like 140, 160 pages. This isn't a scientific explanation as to how vaccines work. It's more of like a social anthropological take on why people don't want to get vaccinated. And so interesting, because here's the thing. It's very rarely to do with vaccines. It's about things like how much you trust your government. Or in the case of like a lot of it's about the polio vaccine and all of those campaigns and stuff. A lot of them are then run by like the WHO and like Western powers. But then if you're like trying to eradicate polio in West Africa or in the Middle East, like people then assume that like the West has an agenda there as well. And it's like how much, it's about like trust and community building and all of that kind of stuff. And it's fascinating. This was written in a pre-COVID world. She was finishing the book just as the first reports started coming in of cases in China. Very interesting timing, but it's not all about COVID, and I think that's also quite an important perspective to then have when you're discussing infectious disease and vaccinations now still in a pandemic world. Some people have started saying post-pandemic, and I'm like, no. Omicron, let's not get diseased. For God's sake, please all stay safe and be responsible. And if you haven't had your vaccination yet, why? But I think it's also really important that one of the things she points out is, you know, if you're very happily left-wing and of course you got vaccinated, if you got vaccinated immediately, everyone in your family did, etc, etc. When then you're speaking to someone or dealing with somebody who isn't, who is a bit more cautious, skeptical, anything like that, the most important fucking thing that you do is you treat these people with respect. One of the things that Heidi talks about a lot is the scientific community gets like accused of being elitist, whatever, but like we've talked about already, is you cannot be 100% rational. So if you're then taking advice from governing bodies and stuff like that and like the medical scientific community, that is just very like data driven and very just do this, and like if you don't do it you're an idiot, like any of that like cold kind of like, that is super alienating to so many people. Examples that she uses, like if you're a young mother and you've had a baby, like, and you've had your first child and stuff, if then your primary care provider, your GP, then if you have any like worry or anything like that, and if they are patronising to you, dismissive to you, anything like that, you will take matters into your hands and do your own research. Because you've been disrespected in this kind of way, someone has been patronising to you, like we all know how that feels. That does not feel good. You feel terrible, especially if you're doing that in a situation where all you want is like the best for your child. Yeah, you're gonna do your own research. You're gonna go on Google and you're gonna find things that now confirm the bias that you have. You're not going to be objective. Like I've said, I don't think you can make a wholly unemotional decision, and I don't think humans can ever be 100% objective. I think this is an important thing to understand. But yeah, you cannot, in situations with things like vaccine distrust, mistrust, whatever, you just don't be a dick. Like I've talked about this already in this video for other things, but you just can't be a dick. And I've seen people do that as well, like people that I know, my friends, and it's like, you can't be rude to these people. If you do that, you're just going to alienate them further. And if then they're taken in by a lot of these like vaccine like conspiracy theories, like the whole like autism one, like yeah, like you get taken in by that, there's a pipeline, like people will go further and further away, and then it becomes very, very difficult. But you just need to treat people with respect and dignity. Like it's shocking that you need to say that. And then yeah, you see that like certain like myths and rumors with vaccines come up time and time again. Like it really does get to me and does shock me that like the whole vaccines cause autism thing is still so prevalent. Vaccines don't cause autism, but it's fascinating to me how that as a rumor has stuck, even though obviously the paper got thrown out, even though the guy, his name is Andrew Wakefield, even though he got, you know, his license taken away, all of that kind of stuff. You know, that study was done on like 12 children. The study, 12. And the damage this has done to like vaccine programs is unbelievable. 12. If you know anything about 12, that is shocking. That's abhorrent, frankly. But I think it's important to see like vaccine rumors and stuff in context, and I think that's what this does, especially because it gives examples over, because Heidi's somebody who's had a really interesting career.
She's currently on the BBC's 100 most influential women list for her work with the vaccine confidence program. Like, genuinely go have a look at her. She's really, really cool.
There's a New York Times article on her. I'll link it in the, I've linked it a bunch of times before, but like I have such an intellectual crush on this woman. I'll link it again. Really, really interesting. And like these rumors, they're always they're always the same, and they're always globally, it happens again and again and again. These aren't one-offs, and they're part of a pattern. And I think that's also comforting. Such an interesting read, and I think whenever you are dealing with, talking to, don't debate. I'm gonna say, which is like, I wouldn't debate this, because if you're in a debate situation with somebody who is skeptical of vaccines, whatever, there is well, some person is wrong, some person is right. All you're gonna do when you're debating this is trying to prove that you're right. And whenever we've had anybody do that to us, we know that that means we do not like that person. You're just gonna further alienate them. So no, I don't debate it. You wanna understand more why someone is skeptical, why they are confused, all of that kind of stuff, you know. Treat them with compassion, treat them with empathy. Don't be a dick, and don't be that, I'm gonna be right about things that I know more about you because you're an idiot. That is just, that's just not respectful, and you just shouldn't treat people like that point blank. Very informative, very interesting to read, and from somebody who is like a credible source. If you want to do your own research, read this. This is from somebody who is actually reliable and knows what they're talking about. There are portions of this that I feel are repetitive, but also I get the impression that this is the kind of book that you get the chapters printed and given as a handout in uni, which then it makes sense that you would have to have the entire context for an entire chapter. You can lift chapters out of this and all of the context is still there for it. I think that's why it's repetitive, but if that bothers you, that's just something that's there. But yeah, that is everything that I have read recently. Hopefully I can squeeze a couple more things in. I was gonna say before the end of term, before the end of the year. Currently, what am I currently reading? I'm currently reading Baldwin Giovanni's Room. I've read 10 whole pages. That is where I am at with all of my reading, and apparently my thinking too. Never stop reading. Never stop reading, never stop learning, never stop challenging yourself. I think there is always going to be something new to learn, and there's always going to be something new to learn, even in areas where you think you know your stuff. I think I get proved this time and time again. There is always something new to learn, and that is one of the most exciting things, I think, about just being a person, just being a human, whether in the name of escapism or self-improvement or like for whatever you read for, just keep reading. Anything on that note? That's this. Thank you very, very much for watching. Let me know what you have read recently. I'm dying to know. Like, subscribe and all that jazz, and I will see you very, very soon now. We're pretty much back to regular programming. Let me know what you want to see. Goodbye.